Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Sit Down. I'm DJ Sixsmith. It is Dr. Lindsey Fitzharris. She's here with us. The Curious Life and Death coming to the Smithsonian Channel this weekend. Dr. Lindsey, how are you?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I hope that your audience is ready for a little bit of a grisly chat here.
Well, first of all, I think you have one of the best Zoom setups I've seen of anybody, and it's kind of fitting to everything that you study and you talk about. So what was it like putting this whole series together?
It was amazing. Yeah, I mean, one of the things here is this ballistic gel body. This is created by a guy named Chris Mills out in Los Angeles, and we use these in the show. And so the show is a bit of everything. It's forensic science, it's true crime, it's a bit of history, which I love because I'm a historian. And we look at the curious deaths of people in the past. So one of the episodes that we're doing this Sunday is reopening the case against Lizzie Borden, who allegedly took an axe in 1892 and killed her father and stepmother. Do you remember that child's rhyme?
No, hit me with it. Let's hear it.
Oh my God, yeah. I think actually it's taught to little girls more, but it's Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. But in reality, it wasn't 81 whacks. It was something like 29, enough to kill two people, don't get me wrong. And she was actually acquitted in 1893 by an all-male jury who couldn't conceive of the fact that a woman could do this.
Well, you hit on a couple different things there. What the facts of the case actually were, how we talk about it today, and an all-male jury looking at this woman saying there's no way she could have done it. So what were some of the other little details that came up that were just kind of blowing your mind?
Well, yeah, so one of the things that we did, we take these bodies, and in some of the episodes, we autopsy them, we do virtual autopsies, we do ballistic tests. With Lizzie Borden, they actually gave me a hatchet, the murder weapon, and I got to see how much force it would take, and crucially, if I had committed this crime, how much blood evidence would be on me, because Lizzie Borden had no blood on her when the police arrived. So one of the key questions we really look at in that show is, if she did it, how did she do it? And there's some really fascinating finds in there, and I think people are going to really enjoy going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, I mean, going all the way back to 1892 is not something we do on a normal everyday basis. So I think people are going to be all about that.
Yeah, I go back to 1892 very often, but I'm hoping people are going to enjoy that. But we do contemporary episodes as well. So we're doing one on Pablo Escobar, the cocaine king of the 1980s. You know, a lot of people out there know the show Narcos on Netflix, and they might think, what is there to say about Pablo Escobar? Well, we interview his son, who was the last person to speak to him before he was shot by allegedly the Colombian police in Medellin in 1993. But his son is adamant that his father would never have allowed himself to be taken prisoner. And so he believes that Pablo Escobar took that kill shot. So one of the things we do is we take these heads out there and on the shooting range, and we do a bunch of ballistic tests. We know what kind of guns everybody was carrying on the rooftop in Colombia that day, and we're able to come up with a verdict.
That's really fascinating, because Escobar is somebody that's obviously been talked about, written about for several decades, but looking at him in a new light, I'm sure it's going to pique people's interest. What else can you tell us just about those conversations and really what you learned about Escobar they didn't already know?
Yeah, I mean, Escobar, it was actually really interesting to interview his son. And his son was really very nice about this. He said, look, whatever you guys find out, I'm going to go with that verdict. But Pablo Escobar was actually exhumed several years after he died. And there's video footage of this. It's really bizarre. It was done for a paternity test. And they take out the skull, and you can definitely see the exit wound there and the kill shot. So all of that was really helpful into piecing this together. But I think that's going to be a really fun episode for people. But we do some more historical episodes. We do Harry Houdini. A lot of people think that he drowned doing a trick in the water torture chamber. But that's a myth that actually came about because a lot of movies were made after he died, and they said that he died doing this trick. But one of the interesting things about Houdini is that he was at war with the spiritualists. These were people who said they could commune with the dead. We still have people like that today. And he wanted to expose them as frauds. And the spiritualists had actually predicted that he would die on Halloween 1926, and that's the exact date that he died, which is also, by the way, great death date for Harry Houdini, Halloween. Yeah. So we look at all of those aspects. So the show, like I said, it's got the contemporary, it's got the historical, and it's definitely got the curious, mysterious factor.
I think you hit on a lot of really interesting things, because with Houdini specifically, we try to put him in a box physically, metaphorically, when we talk about him. We only remember certain things about people. Why do you think that is, especially for somebody like you that studies the history so often?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and I think with someone like Houdini, he was bigger than life, wasn't he? And one of the things that we bring out in the show is the straitjacket. He really made that trick. If it's not actually a trick, we had a escapologist come on and escape from this straitjacket. It's more like a skill than a trick. But he made that very famous. And I'm a medical historian, so I deal with the medical past. And straitjackets are really interesting because they come about in the late 18th century. And I tell a little bit of that history and how they were used in those famous sort of lunatic asylums of the period. And they really had this dark history. But here's Houdini, and he's breaking from the chains of his straitjacket. He's an immigrant. There's a very powerful message there in Houdini's act. I think with him, there's certain things that we remember strongly about him because he wanted us to remember that. He was so in control of his brand. You know, today we talk about branding, YouTubers, all this. Houdini was the original brander, and for him, it's hard to break down those myths because they're so intertwined into that story.
Another really interesting thing about your series is you have an episode all about a Titanic victim. And it feels like we're going to be talking about that forevermore because there's so many fascinating elements to it. What did you discover and what piqued your interest there?
Yeah, the Titanic, you're so right that is just something. I always remind people that actually the Lusitania sank faster and nearly as many people died in Lusitania when it sank. But the Titanic, it's just, there's something about that keeps bringing us back. And one of the things that we try to do in that episode, and especially me as a historian, I like to talk about the side stories, the things that people don't really think about. So when the Titanic sank, most people, that's the end of the story. But actually, there was a morgue ship that went out there and collected all of these bodies and tried to return them to relatives. And there was an unknown child, a little child who was recovered, and they never identified the child. So this child was buried in an unknown grave in Halifax.